Good morning, everybody. We're going to wait a few minutes to get started here. So thanks for joining us, and we'll be with you here in probably about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, hear me?
Roll now. Visit ClarksonEyeCare.com to find the location near you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We will get started here in just a couple minutes. We're still admitting people, so sit back, get comfy, and we'll be with you in just a couple minutes. All right, everybody, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning for our session, Give 'em Pumpkin to Talk About. I'm Chris Wyan. I'm the Education Manager for Illinois Ag in the Classroom, and so excited to talk to you today about pumpkins. If you have questions as we go on, I'll periodically try to check the chat box. We've also got Stephanie and Kevin are on there checking that out as I go. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to add those to the chat feature, and we will make sure that we'll answer those at some point. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get started. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about growing pumpkins in Illinois, what that looks like. We'll talk about a few Illinois ag facts related to pumpkins. I've got 4 or 5 different lessons that we're going to go through and give you some examples for some things you can hopefully take to your classroom this fall. And then I've also got a number of different resources and books for K through 12 levels. We've got all sorts of different pumpkin texts that you can use here as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started here. So oftentimes we think of Illinois as corn and soybeans, right? That's predominantly what you see as you drive around in the country. But actually, Illinois is a major pumpkin producer as well. So we're the #1 pumpkin producing state in the country. And actually, we grow almost 95% of the pumpkins used for processing are grown right here in Illinois. And so in Morton, Illinois, Morton is called the pumpkin capital of the world, and they process 85% of the world's pumpkins right here in our backyard. And I actually was driving through that area last week and stopped and took some video footage of some of the pumpkin field, and so we'll see that here in a little bit. This image here on the right is from our new pumpkin AG Meg, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. But you can see the last 3 years data here, even though we've seen a little bit of a drop in pumpkin acreage, still a major producer of pumpkins here. And in 2019, over $17 million was the value of the harvested pumpkins here in Illinois. So pumpkins are a big thing in different parts of Illinois. Some other pumpkin facts for you here. So we've got our top 5 counties here. You can see, now this is data from 2012, was the last year I could find the data for this. But you can see there's this cluster in west central Illinois here that are the top 4 counties. And you see you got Wayne County all the way down here. That's our number 5 county. And in Tazewell County, that is where Morton is. That's where the Libby plant is. And that's where 85% of the world's pumpkin is canned. So pumpkins are a big thing in Illinois. So let's look at some lesson ideas that we could use to incorporate pumpkins into our classroom. Before I go into lessons, I wanted to touch on pollination. I'm assuming most of us are talking about pollination at some point in our classrooms, particularly if you're an elementary teacher, you're talking about that at some point. And pumpkins are a pretty unique way to talk about that. And so I'm going to maybe go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here to talk about some pollination stuff, in part because it really interests me. So I was a beekeeper for 5 or 6 years, and I haven't kept bees for the last couple years, but it's still a passion of mine, still something I really enjoyed learning more about. And actually, I had a neighbor this past weekend who they just got beehives and they were having issues and called me over, and it was my first time in a hive in a couple years, and so it was pretty exciting. Kind of fed that fire a little bit for me. So honeybees are what I'm most familiar with, and that's what, when people think about pollinators, I think usually we're thinking about honeybees, and they certainly are a really important pollinator. I think the statistic is for 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we take, we have because of pollinators, and honeybees are certainly a really important one for that. So especially out west in major apple, almond orchards, all those areas, they'll truck hives of honeybees around to those certain crops and have them there when it's time to pollinate those crops. So it's a huge industry, and it's a really important part of being able to have the food system that we have is because of pollinators. Honeybees, though, they're not actually a native pollinator. They were brought here, in part they were brought here when colonists started trying to plant apple trees. They realized they need honeybees to fully pollinate those, and so that was one of the reasons that honeybees were brought here, among others. And so they're an important pollinator now, but they're not actually a native pollinator. There's hundreds of different native pollinators that are around that are important too. I didn't know this until this past year. The most important pollinator for pumpkins is a squash bee. And so you can see, I've got a side-by-side picture here. So this is a worker bee, so a female honeybee right here. And then this is a squash bee right here. And so squash bees are an important pollinator for pumpkins, in part because you can see they've got these kind of hairier bodies, and especially their legs here are a lot hairier. So they pick up that pollen from those pumpkin blossoms a lot more effectively, and they spread it a lot more effectively than a honeybee does. Honeybees have pollen sacs, and they stuff the pollen down into the sacs and then fly that back to the hive, and they use that to feed their young. So if you get into a beehive, you can see there's eggs, there's a ring of pollen, and then there's a ring of honey around that. So they've got all this feed ready to go to feed those hatching young. Squash bees don't live in hives like honeybees. They actually live underground. And so they spend much of their lives burrowed in these underground kind of like dens and live kind of these solitary lives. So very, very different than what we normally think of with bees. Squash bees are very different. And so, again, if you think about this from the farmer's perspective, if you're growing pumpkins, you certainly are thinking about pollinators and what you can do to promote pollinators and to get them to your fields, because without good pollination on pumpkins, obviously we don't have a pumpkin crop. I'm by no means an expert on this at all, but from what I understand, there's research going into kind of figuring out when these squash bees are in the ground, what we need to do to maintain their habitat underground, because you can imagine if we till all the time, we're potentially destroying some of that squash bee habitat. And so there's currently some research going on and trying to figure out what does that look like for pumpkin production, for example, to make sure that we're maintaining those habitats for those important pollinators for pumpkins. So I go down that rabbit hole, if nothing else, to say pumpkins are a great way to talk about pollination. And if you're looking for a new kind of interesting way to talk about that with your students, pumpkins are a really cool way to do that, particularly because we're such a major pumpkin producer here in Illinois. So that's a little bit about pumpkins and pollination there, and learning a little bit about a bee that's new to me, the squash bee. All right, with that, I'm going to go on to a few lessons here this morning. Actually, before I do that, let me show you a little video. I grow a few pumpkins at my house. If you've seen any of my other videos I've done here this year, I have a small specialty crop farm. We grow mostly cut flowers, and so pumpkins are just kind of something we've done for fun. So I'm going to take you to my little farm and show you our little pumpkin patch, and then also take you to a commercial pumpkin farm and show you what that kind of field looks like as well here. All right, so this is just a short video showing you a little bit more about pumpkins.
Welcome to our pumpkin patch. So on our farm, we don't grow pumpkins commercially. We grow them just for us, essentially. And this year, my 6-year-old son decided that he wanted to grow pumpkins for his own little pumpkin business. And so we grew a lot more than normal with the intention that he is going to take care of it, and he's going to market them himself and make a little money for himself, and then also save some from college. So behind me here is our pumpkin patch for our son. So we have, I think, 8 different varieties of pumpkins growing here. And just to give you a reference, this is, we grow in 50-foot beds in our gardens. And so this is 1, 2, 3 50-foot long beds. Pumpkins are placed about every foot. So we have about between 40 and 50 pumpkin plants per bed. I actually need to go thin them out because some of them have 2 pumpkins in each hole, and we need to thin them out so they're not quite so thick in there. And so we should expect, with 150 pumpkin plants, we are thinking we'll have anywhere between 300 and 400 pumpkins come this fall. So we have everything from tiny little gourds to some heirloom varieties of different squashes and pumpkins, pie pumpkins, and then more kind of common jack-o'-lantern type pumpkins as well. Here's some of the earlier varieties that I planted. And so these are the male blossoms, and so you can tell because they're on these long stems here. And so those are all male, so none of those are going to turn into pumpkins. And so typically the male blossoms show up a couple weeks before the female blossoms, and I look through here and I don't see any female blossoms yet. And so as soon as those show up, pollinators will go on to the male ones. You can see there's actually bugs inside of there right now. So they will go to the male blossom, and they will go to the female blossoms, and that is how they pollinate to create pumpkins on the same plant. And then this is a volunteer pumpkin plant that we clearly didn't get our field cleaned up very well last year, and this thing started growing, and we just let it grow. So you can see it's a little bit ahead of our other pumpkins that we planted so that they'd be ready about September, into September, early October. This one's going to be ready before that. So you can see this started out, this down here is the remains of what was the female blossom. Once it was pollinated, this pumpkin started to grow from that blossom. You can see here, there's still quite a few male blossoms on the same plant. Okay, so that's our teeny tiny little pumpkin patch that we're doing just for fun and just to give our son a little experience here. Let me show you what the vast majority of pumpkin farms look like in the state of Illinois. So you saw our little pumpkin patch, but this is what pumpkins actually look like when you're growing processing pumpkins in the field. So you can see pumpkins as far as the eye can see. So I'm near Canton, Illinois, and I would be willing to bet that this pumpkin field here, the farmer probably has a contract with Libby's to grow these pumpkins. And typically, when farmers have contracts with a company like Libby's, the farmers are in charge of growing the crop, and Libby's actually comes out and they actually do the harvesting and take it from there to take it to process it at one of their plants. So the farmer does everything up to harvest point, and Libby's takes it from there.
So a couple updates. I filmed that video just a couple days ago, and since then the female blossoms have shown up on our pumpkins, so they're growing really fast. We've also got squash bugs have shown up, which any of you who garden have ever planted zucchini or squash or pumpkins or anything like that, I can't begin to describe to you how much I despise squash bugs. They can kill a plant so fast. They chew on the leaves and the stem, and they have some kind of bacteria that they will infect the plant, and they can kill it very, very quickly. So since then, we are fighting those on our pumpkins right now. It's also prime time for what's called powdery mildew, which is a fungal disease. It's pretty common in a humid climate, so Illinois is a prime place for it. And it actually travels in the wind, and it shows up about this time every year. So if you grow basil, most basil is really susceptible to powdery mildew, pumpkins and zucchini. And so if you ever see like it looks like white powder on the leaves, that's probably some kind of mildew, possibly powdery mildew. So our fun little pumpkin patch is turning into a lot more work than we were expecting here. I'll also tell you that when I went to that pumpkin field I showed you near Canton, you might have noticed there was a lot of empty space in the kind of where I was standing. There was a lot of empty ground. They got just tons and tons of rain a couple nights before I was there, and so I think that a good chunk of that field, kind of the pumpkins got washed out of it because there was so much rain that fell so quickly. So yeah, so just something I didn't mention in the video, but just to kind of point out that there's all sorts of variables with farming that you can only prepare for them as much as you can. All right, I'm going to go back to my presentation here. All right, so now that we've got a little bit of background on pumpkins and growing pumpkins, let's talk about some pumpkin lessons. There we go. All right, as usual, I had my 6-year-old son Lincoln help me out with some of this stuff, and it's interesting. The being home so much has kind of brought out some interesting behavior changes. So we did this about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can see he is still wearing his pajamas because that's just where we are in life. And so yeah, there you go. So this is a pumpkin chain, and I've got it here with me here today as well. And so this is a pretty easy activity for elementary students to get them thinking about the pumpkin life cycle. And so essentially, you just need some basic things. And this full lesson, if you go onto our website, agintheclassroom.org, you can type in pumpkin chain, and you can get a full lesson for this, including the cutouts for this. And so you don't have to recreate those. You can just print those out and have them. So you need the templates for these shapes here. So we've got a seed, we've got the leaf, we've got a blossom, green pumpkin, and an orange pumpkin. You'll need a hole puncher and some yarn. And then this is just 2 orange paper plates. And what we did is you just staple them together and then you leave a gap so that then you can pull the whole chain out of the pumpkin, and then they can, students can then explain the life cycle of that pumpkin. And I can tell you, it's pretty cool to see. You know, I taught high school, so I haven't necessarily got to experience that kind of childhood wonder as much as all you elementary teachers. But seeing my son, you know, I explained it to him once, talked to him about the life cycle of the pumpkin, and then everyone who he's seen, he's been talking to them about it. And his little, 8-month-old cousin, this morning, he was pulling this out and explaining it to him. So that's the idea with this, is it's something that gets them engaged in understanding that life cycle, and then it's something they can also explain to somebody else. So that's pumpkin chain, a really simple one, but a really easy way to talk a little bit about growing pumpkins. All right, this next one is called 3D pumpkins. And again, if you go on our website, you can type this into the search bar at the top, and you can come up with the templates for this. There's a couple different ways that you could do this. So we have these different pumpkin facts on these strips of orange paper. So we got Illinois is the #1 state for growing pumpkins. Pumpkins are produced by pollination. And then Morton is the pumpkin capital of the world. And so again, you just need these pieces of paper and a hole punch and these little brad fasteners. And you can actually poke a hole in each end of the paper and then fold them around and create this little 3D pumpkin, and you've got your little green square of paper for the leaf at the top. That would work just fine for younger kids. If you wanted to make it more of a little kind of like a mini research project, we have a number of pumpkin resources, and I'll share some of those with you later, but you could do something where you ask students to write down their own pumpkin facts. So whatever, book you read in class or whatever activity you do with pumpkins, have them write their own pumpkin facts down on the papers, and then they can make their own 3D pumpkin using the facts that they learned. So again, a way that you can kind of beef that up to make that a little more interesting for maybe some older classes as well. So that's 3D pumpkin. Again, a couple different ways that you can incorporate that. And we've done it too, where you can make this look like the earth. You can use different types of paper. So any kind of globe type shape that you wanted to do an activity like that with, this would be a pretty good way to incorporate that in there. Next one is what's inside my pumpkin. Again, we're relying heavily on these orange paper plates here, which work pretty well for this. And so this is basically a book talking about what's inside a pumpkin. And so you can see the outside says what's inside a pumpkin. If I go to the next pages, we took a white paper plate, and so we cut out the inside of the orange paper plate and then glued the two together. And again, you can see what we do what we can right now with what we're working with all this craziness right now. We have on the full lesson, we have sentences here that you can write out. My son, he gave me about all he could possibly give me. And so all that was he was willing to write shell and pulp, and that was about it. So if you want to do more with this, the lesson does more with it. I was just working with the tools I've been given at the moment. So this is the shell here. We've got some orange and yellow yarn we've glued on to show the pulp. Then we've got some pumpkin seeds, which you can buy. They're readily available year-round at the grocery store. We glued some pumpkin seeds on there. And then the final page, you could have students find pictures of pumpkins and repeat what's inside the pumpkin, right? Pumpkins have a shell, pulp, and seeds inside. And then the whole thing, you punch a hole through the paper plates, and then you just tie it together with some more yarn and make that book. Again, a good way to get them to not only learn the information, but then reteach that information to other people and show that to other people. So another easy, simple way to bring that idea of pumpkins into your classroom. All right. Next, I'm going to go to, so our intern Hannah has been helping us out with a lot of different things this summer, and including she's made some really cool videos. And so she's got a lot of great energy. And so this is a cool video about making pumpkin pie in a bag. So this year, this fall especially, is probably going to be pretty weird for a lot of us in classrooms here. And so, whether or not this is going to be a lesson that you could use this fall, I guess remains to be seen. But in a normal year, when we get back to that, this is a great way to talk to kids about not only pumpkins, but also pumpkin pie and what goes into that and what goes into to where their food comes from. So I'm going to show you this short video here and show you how to make pumpkin pie in a bag in your classroom.
Hi everybody, I'm super excited because today to this. That's right, today we are going to be making pumpkin pie in a bag. Now, pumpkins are such an important crop in Illinois. In fact, Morton, Illinois is known as the pumpkin capital of the world. So to make your pumpkin pie in a bag, you need a few ingredients. You're going to need pumpkin. Libby's pumpkin is actually produced in Illinois. You're going to need pumpkin pie spice to give it that flavor, cinnamon, graham crackers, milk, pudding, and of course Ready Whip to top it off. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is grab a gallon-sized Ziploc bag to dump in your milk and your pudding. And I'm going to get a little bit of help for this because it's really easy to spill your milk. So Caroline is going to come help me out. So first things first, I measure up 1 1/3 cup of milk. And typically for a single batch that serves about 4 to 5 people, you're only going to pour in 2/3 cup, but I want to double the batch so that I can use all of my pumpkin. After dumping in the milk, then we're going to do the pudding. And so this is vanilla instant pudding, and this is the 3.4 ounce portion. I spilled it a little over Caroline here. That's why she's such a great assistant. You might need scissors to help you out cutting it open, but I decided just to go for it. Okay, so once you've dumped in your pudding and your milk, you're gonna make sure all your air is out of your bag, and you're just gonna shake it up. I'm using like the closed Ziploc bag. I would recommend using a Ziploc bag that actually seals together really well, because I can easily be really careful about kneading my pudding. But if you're doing this with small kids, it's going to be a lot harder for them sometimes to keep the pudding down out of the Ziploc because it will leak. I've kneaded it for a little bit now, and it's already turned into pudding. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the spices and the pumpkin. So, oh wait, I need my assistant. There she is, perfect. Here you go, Caroline. So first, we're gonna measure in about a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And if you like a little more spices, you can add a little extra. That's kind of just a personal preference, but I would add about a teaspoon of cinnamon and a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Next, we're gonna add the pumpkin. We're just gonna go ahead and dump the whole pan in, because why not? And that is what the recipe calls for. After dumping in most of your can of pumpkin, you can go ahead and seal the bag back up. Thanks, Caroline. Then after dumping in the pumpkin, you're gonna knead it and knead it some more. Our pumpkin pie filling. Now, this should serve about 10 people. It's not a lot, but a good amount. But did you know that the biggest pumpkin pie ever made was made in 2010 and weighed 3,699 pounds? That is a huge pie. We've been needing a lot more cans of pumpkin for sure. After kneading your pumpkin pie filling for a little bit, then you're gonna make your crust. And so for our crust, I put a sheet of graham cracker, and all I have to do is crush it up in this bag. And you can take like a rolling pin or get a little kid to pound it with their fist if you want it to be more crumbly, but really, this is enough for me. So next, I'm gonna take my little Dixie cup. This is a 3-ounce Dixie cup, and I'm going to dump some graham cracker crumbs at the bottom. And I'm going to make 2, one for me and one for my assistant. needed kitchen scissors here, but you can just use paper scissors as well. And then you're just gonna squeeze just like that. And then the best part, Cool Whip, or in this case, Ready Whip. Nice and on the top. And then, cause I'm feeling fancy today, I'm gonna put just a little dash of cinnamon on top. That one looks a little better. And then all I need is a friend or an assistant to help me enjoy it. And there you had it. You've made pumpkin pie in a bag.
All right. First of all, thank you to Hannah for putting that together. She is much more exciting to listen to than me talking the whole time. So thank you to Hannah. When I first started growing pumpkins a few years ago, I grew mostly pie pumpkins, which have a higher sugar content because I wanted to be able to make homemade pumpkin pie with pumpkins we grew and the whole deal. So I wanted to show off. So we grew the pumpkins the whole year. We cut them in half and roasted them in the oven and took out the puree and we freeze it and then we can use it year round. And I'll say I can make a pretty mean pumpkin pie, but then when I think about all that work and then when you have the pumpkin pie in a bag like Hannah just made, you start to second guess your life choices because there is not a darn thing wrong with pumpkin pie in a bag. It's pretty good stuff. So yeah, a great lesson to do with your students, and it's nice because they can actually do it themselves, right? It's not you just demonstrating it; they can actually get in there and squeeze the bag and do all that stuff. So again, in a normal year, I think that's a pretty great lesson to be able to do with your students. I'll also say, all the video content that we've been putting out this spring and summer, all that stuff is on our YouTube channel, and so if there's any of our videos that you want to just show to your classes, that stuff's all hosted on there and easily accessible. And so, even if there's stuff you want to send home with parents or you wanted them to be able to make pumpkin pie in a bag at home, all that content's out there. And so please feel free to share that stuff. And we'll talk more about this at our sessions next week, but we're also this fall, we're still working out the details, but we're going to have each month, we're going to have different themes and we're going to be creating more content, more lessons, videos, things like that on those themes. And so for instance, in October, we're going to be doing a bunch of pumpkin stuff. And so if that's something that you're interested in, we're going to promote a lot of that through our Facebook and our social media. And so we're going to be sending that stuff out, and so that you guys have some other ideas for that and some new ideas as well. So just kind of things to know for the future, specifically related to pumpkins, but also there'll be some other themes in there as well. All right, very good. So that's pumpkin pie in a bag. I'm going to start sharing my screen again here. All right. Okay. So I want to go into the last portion here is just giving you some additional resources and some things I want to share. And I'm going to show you part of one other short video just because it's kind of a different side to the whole pumpkin thing. And I think we'll also connect well to some of our suggested texts. So what I did was I just found some other nonfiction texts that are possibilities for you to share with your students. And so these can be found online. I'm not going to click on these right now, but I'll post this PowerPoint to our blog, the beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com, so you can access those later. So this is a really good article that was put out by, if any of you have country insurance, you probably get the Partners magazine 4 times a year. So this was, I think, a year or two ago. They had an article about Illinois, the Great Pumpkin State. So it's a good, easy read for students. I've also got U of I Extension has a website that has just dozens and dozens of pumpkin facts on it. So that's a good resource too, especially if you're doing something like the 3D pumpkin activity. You could use that to find pumpkin facts. And then I found a number of other videos. And so these are all good. The first two are probably the easiest connection to your classroom. So the first one is actually a video that Libby's put out a few years ago, and it's how to grow pumpkins. And so it goes from planting the pumpkins in the early summer and then harvesting them and processing in their plant, and it's hosted by a young girl. And so it's got a lot of good connections for students, and it's pretty cool to go through the plant and you can actually see they've got cans stacked up, just stories high of these cans of pumpkins. So it's pretty cool to see that whole process and how that works. And so that's a really cool video. I'm going to show you a portion of this one. Growing giant pumpkins is a thing, and so there's competitions all over the country for this, and there's actually a giant pumpkin growing club here in Illinois also. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. I've also got a video that has it's just some drone footage of harvesting pumpkins. You might be surprised on how they harvest pumpkins, and so it's pretty cool aerial shot just to see how they do it. And the last one is just kind of silly, but it made me laugh, and so I included it. Brookfield Zoo, around Halloween time, they make jack-o'-lanterns, and then they give the pumpkins to certain animals that's part of their diet, and then it's just a video stream of animals ripping apart pumpkins and eating pumpkins, and so that's not connected to any learning standards. That is just silliness and fun. So so that's there too. So let me show you. Let me go to this other video here. All right, give me 1 second to get it pulled up here. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to show you this whole video here, but I just wanted you to get an idea of this trend of growing these giant pumpkins. I know next to nothing about how these growers do this, but it's pretty fascinating to see what you can do with. You couldn't do this with all varieties of pumpkins, but certain varieties and under certain growing conditions, they can really stretch the realm of what you think is possible with pumpkins.
Hi, I'm Kevin Heap, and welcome to Heap's Giant Pumpkin Farm. We're having a giant pumpkin WeighOff. It's going to take place here in just a little bit. Our farm's probably right at 160 years old or so, and we started growing pumpkins, I bet, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, and we grow right at 26.5 acres of pumpkins. Oh, it's really cool. What can't you not like about giant pumpkins? How cool is that? The time it takes to grow these things is incredible.
Alright, smallest to biggest. We're weighing smallest to biggest based on just size measurements. Yeah, basically I founded this with a bunch of local growers about 15 years ago. So in Illinois, there's probably maybe 10 to 15 serious competitive growers, and that varies year to year. It's a tough hobby, so a lot of people, they'll drop out after a couple years if there's not success. I mean, there's no guarantees when it comes to growing giant pumpkins. This is maybe half of what the world record would be. You know, this is half of a 2,000-pound pumpkin. Yeah. Top prize is $500. Plus we have a traveling championship belt that goes to the champion. The heaviest weight on this belt is 1861 in 2016 from Joe.
I've always loved pumpkins ever since I was little. You go to the pumpkin patch, and even when I was a little kid, I had to get the biggest pumpkin that they would have out there. So as you get older, you just realize you can't find those in the store. You got to grow them yourself, and it's just turned out to be this. You wouldn't really want to eat one of these type of pumpkins. Usually those little tiny sugar pie pumpkins are the ones that you eat with. The other thing is too, some of the stuff that the growers put in there, I don't think I'd want to be eating it.
I mean, I make pumpkin pies out of like the carving, so I hack up the face. I'll make about a dozen pies for Thanksgiving for family and friends. Yeah, no, they're good. They're good eating. We're down to the two last competitors, mine and Joe's, for the biggest. So I got my pumpkin and Joe's is strapped up.
Oh, 1258. I was shooting for 1300, but you can't get too greedy.
Last pumpkin to be weighed is mine, and 1258 is the weight to beat. So we're going to see here in a minute what's going down. Getting down to the nitty gritty.
It all comes down to the nitty gritty.
That's it.
It's crunch time, baby.
It's crunch time. Here we go. That's it, man. It is. It is what it is. What are you going to do? If I lost.
All right, I'll stop it there. So Joe won here. sure he's the least popular guy in the room at that point. That's just some good wholesome fun. I like a hobby where you have to have a forklift and a trailer just to compete, let alone being able to grow a pumpkin that big. So lots of different ways to talk about pumpkins with your students. There's a lot of children's books that specifically deal with big pumpkins, giant pumpkins. The farm where that took place at Heaps Pumpkin Farm, they're featured in our new Pumpkin Ag Mag, which I'll show you here in a few minutes. And they kind of specialize in that. They have a lot of giant pumpkins around their farm. So they're up in northern Illinois. And so, yeah, so something that is around, there's people doing that. And so again, another way to talk about that with your students there. There's also a very good Curious George episode with giant pumpkins that I've watched more times than I'm willing to admit over the years. So yeah, that's a good one too. All right, I'm going to go on to back to my PowerPoint here. All right, so that's additional resources there for you to check out. Again, we'll post this onto our blog site. All right, our new Pumpkin Ag Mag, this is actually still in the proofing process, and so this is going to go to print here in the next week or two, most likely. And so we will have this available this fall if everything goes right, and the online version will be up before that. And so this is just a couple pages from it. I've used a couple of graphics from it in this presentation already, so lots of great pumpkin information in here. All of our ag mags have a career connection, and so this year we've got a farmer who grows processing pumpkins and has a contract with Libby. We've got a professor and a scientist, a plant disease scientist at U of I, and then we've also got Kaylee Heap, who's the wife of the Heap who was on the pumpkin video there just a minute ago. And so they have more of kind of like an agritourism type pumpkin patch kind of thing. So those are all on there, so you can kind of see all different careers related to growing pumpkins here in Illinois. So again, Pumpkin Ag Mag is coming out this fall, and so watch for that. If you want copies of that, you're going to do that through your county level ag literacy coordinator. So again, that information is on our website. You can reach out to your county person and they can get you copies of those ag mags for you. All right. Moving on to some book recommendations. So for elementary level, we've got lots of good ones here. One of our favorites here is Pick a Pumpkin by Patty Todd. And so she's actually, I think she's on the call. I saw her pop up on there earlier. And I'll say why I'm talking about that. I know it's hard to believe, but I made a mistake. And I accidentally said that our field trip this Thursday was going to be to a Cass County farm. Actually, we're going to the Illinois Center for the Book this week. And author of Pick a Pumpkin, Patty Todd, is going to be there, with us on that call as well. And so if you want to hear more from her, please join us on Thursday for that. The Zoom link that I shared with you does still work. That everything's totally fine with that. It's just we're not going to Cass County until the following Tuesday. So these are all great books here. This one, this From Seed to Pumpkin here is a really good one to talk about that pumpkin life cycle. The life cycle of pumpkin here is more of kind of like a mini encyclopedia kind of book. And then we've got some kind of fun ones here as well. Pumpkin Jack shows like the decay process and that kind of thing. And they leave some seeds and then grow more pumpkins the next year out of pumpkin jacks, remains, that kind of thing. So all those are great elementary books. And the nice thing about pumpkins is there's no shortage of really, really good books about pumpkins out there. Middle and high school level, that's the background I came from. These are a couple books that we really like. So Rainbow Rowell, if you're a middle or high school level teacher, you might know Rainbow Rowell. She wrote Eleanor and Park, popular young adult book a few years ago. So this is a graphic novel. Pumpkinheads, it's great. It takes place on a pumpkin farm, like an agritourism kind of pumpkin farm, and it's two kids getting ready to graduate and kind of go on to the next step in life, and they're working there in the summer. So really good book. It's a quick read, and so it'd be an easy book to incorporate into some longer units in your classroom. Squashed is a Joan Bauer book. This is a really good one too. It's a high school girl who has all sorts of awkward high school things that happen in high school, and so there's all that kind of stuff going on in the book. But then she also is passionate about growing giant pumpkins, and so throughout the book, she is struggling to try to have the biggest pumpkin for the annual pumpkin weighing contest, and is fighting with all these grown men and all sorts of things. So it's really funny. It's a great book, and again has all sorts of pumpkin related things in it, as well as just a really good story, kind of a coming of age story for that high school age. I've also started, I was supposed to present at the Illinois Reading Council Conference on pumpkins this fall, which that conference has been pushed back to March at the earliest. So we'll see. I don't know if I'll still do pumpkins at that point or not, but I'm in the midst of creating a unit plan that's all things pumpkin for middle high school level. And so that's still in the works, but I'll share with you what I've got so far. These 2 texts are great. And then I've got a number of poems that are all open access online, and that are all sorts of different things related to pumpkins. And most of these are all historical poems, so there's some nice history connections with them as well. And so within the next 6 months or so, I'm hoping to have a full pumpkin unit plan for middle high school level, so kind of stay tuned for that. That's still in the works. All right, so I'm nearing the end here, so I'm gonna give you a couple reminders here. First off, don't forget to fill out that reflection. You will get a certificate of completion from us in a little over a week. And then also, we're going to randomly draw 3 names from that, and we're going to mail 3 copies of Pick a Pumpkin also. So another good reason to fill out that reflection and give us that feedback. On Thursday, again, we're going to Illinois Center for the Book, and then Patty Todd is going to join us. Next week, we're starting to look a little different. So on Tuesday next week, we're going to do our field trip to Cass County. And then Thursday is our big final extravaganza here. So we've got an all-day event. We've got 5 different sessions. Each one is 50 minutes long. And we've got breaks built in between, and we're focusing on the cultures of agriculture. And so we're really excited about it. We've got a lot of great stuff. So it'll be me, Kevin, and Stephanie in the morning, talking about different things related to the cultures of agriculture. And then we'll take a break. And then in the afternoon, we'll have all of the interns from the different commodity groups will come on, and they're going to talk to you more about resources that those organizations have that they can offer you to help you in your classrooms this year as well. So next Thursday is going to be a big one. We'll have we'll send out individual Zoom links for all those sessions, and look forward to having you join us for as many of those as you're able to. All right. Thank you so much for joining me here this morning. I hope that you got some interesting stuff and some stuff that you can use in your classroom. I'm going to start looking at the chat here, and so feel free to stay on if there's anything that I can answer from the chat box that hasn't been answered already. I'm going to do that at this point. If you do take off, again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And please fill out that reflection real quick and enter a chance to win Pick a Pumpkin. All right. All right, looks like we're talking some about squash bees here. Looks like we've got some additional resources on those. Oh, growing a milk pumpkin. That's interesting. I haven't heard that one. All right, this is a nice kind of STEM activity idea here, the catapulting pumpkins idea. That's cool. That sounds like a neat idea. All right, I'll hang out here for another minute or two here. If you've got questions, please feel free to put those on there. Any of the lessons that I talked about today, you can go on our website and search for those, and those are all there and have the templates you can cut out and the whole deal there. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come up here. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I got you out of here a little bit early this morning, so hopefully you've got an exciting day ahead of you here. So thank you, everybody.